Before the rain started falling harder against the motel windows, before the desk clerk's voice dropped to an awkward whisper, a woman with her hand pressed flat against her pregnant belly heard the four words that had been chasing her across 3 state lines. "Your card's been declined." She stared at the machine as if it had betrayed her. Because of course it had. Everything else had. "Can you try it again?" Same result. The clerk's face said everything her mouth didn't. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded stack of bills. Counted them slowly. Ones, fives, a single 10. $23. "How much is the room?" 89 plus tax. The silence that followed was the kind that makes strangers look away. The kind that holds its breath. She was 7 months pregnant. Her left hand trembled. Her right hand still held the $23 like it might somehow multiply if she squeezed hard enough. "Is there anywhere else?" she whispered. "Anywhere cheaper?" 12 feet behind her, a man in a charcoal overcoat slowly set down the pen he'd been using to fill out his registration card. Because men who built empires on reading people didn't miss details like this. The wedding ring she kept touching. The hand on her belly. The mascara dried in streaks beneath her eyes. He'd seen desperation before. He'd caused plenty of it. But this was different. This was the sound of someone who had run out of places to run, and something about that sound made him stop breathing. The Cormorant Motor Lodge sat at the edge of Marlowe County, just past the place where the interstate gave way to a 2-lane road that didn't lead anywhere anyone wanted to go. It was the kind of motel that existed for people passing through, not people who had arrived. A neon sign that buzzed and flickered, half the letters dark. Carpet that had once been burgundy and was now the color of dried rust. A vending machine outside room 4 that hadn't worked in 15 years, its glass foggy with neglect. The lobby smelled of mildew and industrial cleaner, the particular combination that every cheap motel shares, as if they all bought it from the same sad catalog. Plastic flowers wilted in a vase on the counter, their petals coated with dust. A television mounted in the corner played late-night news with the volume too low to hear. A fly buzzed somewhere near the window, trapped and looking for a way out. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late October. The rain had started an hour ago and hadn't stopped, the kind of rain that doesn't fall so much as press down, turning everything gray, turning headlights into smears, turning the world into something you had to squint to see. The clerk was a woman in her 60s named Patsy, according to her name tag. She had a crossword puzzle folded beside the register and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked at the pregnant woman at the counter with sympathy and relief that it wasn't her. The man in the charcoal overcoat stood at the far end of the counter. He hadn't spoken yet. He hadn't needed to. There was an energy around him, a stillness that wasn't peaceful but coiled, like a spring that had learned patience, like something waiting. His driver waited outside in a black sedan, engine running, headlights cutting through the rain. He was supposed to be here for one night, handling a matter that didn't require his presence, but benefited from it. He had not planned to stay longer than necessary. That was about to change. Her name was Seren Pemberton. She was 31 years old, 7 months pregnant, and had been driving for 3 days with no destination. She had left Ashford, Connecticut on Monday night. It was now Thursday. In between, she'd slept twice, once in a rest stop parking lot outside Harrisburg, with her doors locked and her hand on the pepper spray she'd bought at a gas station, and once in the back seat of her Camry in a Walmart parking lot in West Virginia, where a security guard knocked on her window at 4 a.m. and asked if she was okay. She had said yes. The lie had come easily. It was becoming the only word she knew how to say. Her hair was dark auburn, unwashed for 4 days, pulled back into a braid that morning. Muscle memory, ritual, and the kind of small act that keeps you from falling apart when everything else already has. She wore a gray maternity sweater she'd bought at a thrift store 2 months ago, when her regular clothes stopped fitting. Dark jeans, flat shoes that were practical for driving, a coat that was too thin for October, but had been the first thing she'd grabbed from the closet. In that closet, there had been a cashmere coat Nash had bought her for their second anniversary. Soft, expensive, the color of winter clouds. She hadn't taken it. She hadn't taken anything he'd given her, except the baby. She pressed her palm against her belly and felt the flutter of movement. A kick, a roll. A small reminder that no matter what had collapsed, something inside her was still alive, still growing, still depending on her to figure this out. $23. That's what remained. She'd started with $400, cash from an envelope hidden in the back of her desk drawer. Money Nash didn't know about because Nash had never looked closely enough at her life to notice the small ways she'd been preparing for something she hadn't admitted she was afraid of. $400 had seemed like a lot 3 days ago. Gas had taken 180 over 2 fill-ups. Her car wasn't efficient, and she'd driven over 800 miles. Food, granola bars, crackers, one diner meal in Maryland where she'd allowed herself scrambled eggs because the baby needed protein, took 55. The first motel, back in Pennsylvania when exhaustion made her vision blur, took 70. Prenatal vitamins from a pharmacy when she realized she'd forgotten hers cost 28. Tolls and parking and a bottle of water here and there ate the rest in small, relentless bites. Now the math had caught up with her. She could sleep in the car again. She'd done it before. But the cramps had started around 8 p.m. Not labor, just the kind that come from sleeping in a car seat with a 7-month belly pressing against everything. And she'd known she needed a real bed. The cramps had scared her. The way the baby had gone still for 20 minutes afterward had scared her more. She wasn't just responsible for herself anymore. Every decision she made twice. Once for her. Once for the child she hadn't met yet, but already loved, with a ferocity that startled her. The clerk was looking at her with pity. Seren could feel it like humidity, like something damp pressing against her skin. She hated pity. She'd spent 3 years married to a man who gave her everything except what she needed. What she needed was to not find her husband in their kitchen at 2 p.m. on a Monday, with his hand on another woman's hip and his mouth on another woman's neck. What she needed was to not hear him say, when he'd finally turned around, "You're not going to leave. You have nowhere to go." He'd been right about one thing. She had nowhere to go. But she'd left anyway. And now here she was, standing in a motel lobby in a county she couldn't name, in a state she'd only passed through once before, with $23 and a baby who wouldn't stop kicking, and a question she couldn't answer. What happens tomorrow? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Nash had been calling every 2 hours since Tuesday morning. She didn't look at it. She couldn't. The clerk cleared her throat. "Ma'am, if you can't pay for the room, I understand." Seren's voice was steady. 3 years of marriage had taught her how to keep the shaking on the inside where no one could see it. "Thank you for trying." She turned toward the door. The rain was still falling. The car was still parked outside. The back seat was still the only bed she had. She took one step, then another. And then a voice behind her said, "Put the room on my account." Seren froze. She didn't turn around immediately. Her body had learned, over 3 years of marriage, to wait before reacting, to assess, to calculate the cost of every response before giving it. "Excuse me?" The clerk's voice had changed. There was something in it now. A deference that hadn't been there before. "The room. Put it on my account. And the one next to it, if it's available." "Yes, Mr. Vidal. Of course." Vidal. The name meant nothing to Seren. But the way the clerk said it, the way the syllables landed with weight, the way her posture shifted, told her it meant something to someone. Something significant. She turned. The man in the charcoal overcoat stood at the far end of the counter. He wasn't looking at her. He was sliding a black card across the laminate surface with 2 fingers. His face was calm, his posture still. There was nothing overtly threatening about him, and yet Seren felt the instinct she'd learned to trust, the instinct to become smaller, quieter, less visible. "I don't need your help." The words came out before she could stop them. Now he looked at her. His eyes were the color of slate after rain, gray with something darker underneath. He studied her for a moment. Not the way men usually studied her, not with hunger or appraisal, but with something closer to recognition, as if he were reading a sentence he'd seen before in a different book. "I know you don't need it," he said. "I'm offering anyway." "Why?" "Because you're pregnant, it is midnight, and you were about to sleep in your car. You have a pillow and blanket in your back seat. I saw them when I pulled in. Your gas tank is close to empty. And you've been crying recently. Maybe in the last hour." She said nothing. There was nothing to say. He'd seen everything she'd tried to hide. "Take the room," he said. "There are no strings. No conditions. You'll never see me again after tonight if that's what you want. But it's raining. You're exhausted. And whatever you're running from will still be there in the morning. At least face it after a real night's sleep." The clerk was holding out a key card. Seren looked at the key. She looked at the man. She looked at the door leading back to the rain and the car and the back seat that smelled like fear and fast food wrappers. And for a moment, she was back in Ashford. The kitchen had Italian tile. That was the detail she couldn't stop thinking about in the days after. Not the woman's face. She'd barely registered the woman's face. Not Nash's expression when he turned around. What haunted her was the tile. They'd picked it out together. A Saturday in April, 2 years ago. They'd driven to a showroom in Hartford and spent 3 hours looking at samples, holding them up to the light, debating the difference between Tuscan clay and Umbrian stone. Nash had made a joke about becoming the kind of couple who argued about tile, and she'd laughed, and for a moment she'd felt like maybe they were going to be okay. That was the tile she was standing on when she found him with his hand on another woman's hip. It was 2 p.m. on a Monday. She'd come home early from the obstetrician. The appointment had been shorter than expected. Good news. The baby was healthy, everything progressing normally, and she'd wanted to tell him in person. She'd wanted to see his face when she showed him the ultrasound. She saw his face. Just not the way she'd imagined. The woman was blonde. Younger than Seren by at least 5 years. She was wearing a dress that cost more than Seren's first car, and her hand was on Nash's chest, and they were laughing about something. And then they weren't laughing because Seren was standing in the doorway with her hand on her belly and the ultrasound photo still in her purse. The silence lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. Long enough to change everything. "Seren, this isn't... Don't." She didn't raise her voice. She'd learned not to raise her voice. Nash didn't respond well to raised voices. Nash responded by becoming cold, by withdrawing, by making her feel like she was the problem. "You need to calm down," he said. "You're pregnant. This kind of stress isn't good for the baby." "How long?" He was quiet. She watched him calculate how much truth to tell, how to frame it. 6 months, he said finally. 6 months. She was 7 months pregnant, which meant he'd started sleeping with someone else when she was 1 month along. When she'd been so sick with morning sickness she could barely keep down crackers, and he'd held her hair back and told her everything was going to be perfect. "It didn't mean anything," he said. "It meant enough for 6 months. Seren, listen to me." He stepped toward her. She stepped back. Something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance. The first hint of anger. "You're not going to leave. Let's be realistic. You don't have a job. You don't have family. Your friends..." "My friends?" She knew what he meant. 3 years of marriage, and she'd ended up with no one. Her college roommate, Nash, found her exhausting. Her co-workers, Nash, suggested she quit. Her mother dead at 53. Her father remarried and distant. He'd made sure of it. That was the architecture of his control. Not just the affairs, but the isolation. "You're going to stay," he said, his voice shifting from apologetic to certain. "In a few months you'll have this baby and realize none of this matters." He reached for her hand. She pulled away. At 11 p.m., while Nash slept, Seren carried a duffel bag downstairs. 3 changes of clothes, prenatal vitamins, a book her mother had inscribed before she died. "For my daughter, when she becomes a mother. You'll be wonderful. Love, Mom." And from the back of her desk drawer, the envelope with $400. She drove into the dark without looking back. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. Now she stood in a motel lobby 3 days later, holding a key card a stranger had paid for, and Nash's words echoed like prophecy. "Where are you going to go?" The man, Vidal, was still watching her. Not with pity, not with expectation. Just watching. "Why do you care?" she asked. He looked at the window, at the rain streaking the glass. "Because I've seen that look before," he said. "The one that says you're about to do something desperate because you think you're out of options." He paused. "You're not out of options. You just can't see them yet." Seren took the key. Cormac Vidal had not been born into power. He'd been born in a 2-room apartment above a dry cleaner in Kessler Falls, New York, to a mother who worked double shifts at a treadmill and a father who worked on cars when he was sober enough to hold a wrench. His father, Donald, had hands the size of dinner plates and a temper that could shift from laughter to violence in the space of a single breath. He was the kind of man who told jokes at bars and threw punches at home. The kind who bought flowers on Fridays and broke furniture on Saturdays. The kind whose moods were weather systems. Unpredictable, uncontrollable, impossible to prepare for. His mother's name was Riva. She had been beautiful once. Cormac had seen the photographs, a young woman with dark hair and high cheekbones, and a smile that looked like it came easily. By the time Cormac was old enough to remember, that smile was gone, replaced by something careful, something watchful. The expression of a woman who had learned to sense shifts in temperature, to know by the sound of a closing door whether the next hour would be safe. Reva had a younger sister named Mayela, who died at 19 in a car accident. A rainy night, a sharp curve, a truck that crossed the center line. She kept a photograph of Myla on the kitchen windowsill and spoke of her often, always with love, always with the particular ache of someone who had lost too much too young. "She was braver than me," Reva told Cormac once, when he was 10. "Myla would have left your father the first time he raised his hand. But I'm not brave like her. I'm just surviving." Reva never left. Cormac asked her once, when he was 12, why she stayed. They'd been sitting in the kitchen after one of Donald's episodes. A broken lamp, a shattered plate, his mother with a bruise forming on her forearm that she was already planning to explain away. "Where would I go?" she'd said. "No money, no family, not since Mayela, no job that pays enough. And if I leave, what happens to you? I can take care of myself. You're 12. She'd smiled at that, a sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "When you're older, you'll understand that sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes you just pick the bad choice that keeps you alive until tomorrow." She stayed until Cormac was 17. Then, on a night in February when the snow was falling and the wind rattled the windows, Donald came home with whiskey on his breath and decided Reva had looked at him wrong. Cormac heard the first crash from his room, then the second. His mother's voice saying, "Donald, please," in that quiet tone that meant she was trying to shrink, trying to de-escalate, trying to survive. He walked into the kitchen. His father had his mother by the throat. Cormac didn't remember picking up the chair. He didn't remember swinging it. He remembered the sound it made when it connected. A wet, heavy crack that seemed to silence everything else. His father falling, his mother gasping, and himself standing there with the broken chair leg in his hand, feeling nothing. Not fear, not horror, not guilt, just nothing. Donald survived. The police came. Riva told them she'd fallen. Donald, when he woke 3 days later, said he didn't remember. No charges were filed. But something changed. Donald looked at his son differently now, with wariness that bordered on fear. The violence didn't stop completely, but it became rarer, more controlled. As if he'd learned his son was no longer someone to ignore. Cormac left at 18. He kissed his mother's forehead, and she held his face and said, "Be careful who you become." He hadn't been careful. He'd learned that power was the only thing that mattered. That fear was more reliable than love. He'd built an empire in the spaces between legitimate business, the kind that operated in margins, in silences, in the things that happened after certain phone calls. By 45, Cormac Vidal was a name that opened doors and closed others permanently. He had lawyers who never lost. Men like Tiernan, his right hand for 11 years, who handled things without being told twice. He had everything, except the one thing that had started it all. Riva died when Cormac was 32, not from Donald's hands. He'd drunk himself to death 4 years earlier, alone in that apartment, found by a neighbor who noticed the smell. Riva died from exhaustion, from a heart asked to carry too much for too long, from a body that had finally given up. Cormac was there at the end. He held her hand. "Don't forget the boy who saved me," she whispered. "Don't forget who you were before all this." He'd tried to forget that boy, buried him under money and power and control, told himself softness was weakness, compassion a liability. And then he walked into a motel lobby and saw a pregnant woman asking if there was anywhere cheaper. And that boy woke up. Cormac didn't go to his room. He watched Seren disappear down the hallway, then took out his phone and texted Tiernan. "Find out who she is." 10 minutes later, his phone rang. Seren Pemberton, 31, married to Nash Pemberton, real estate developer. Old Connecticut money. He filed a missing person report claiming she's mentally unstable, possibly a danger to herself and the baby. Is she? No psychiatric history. But he has money and connections. He's already filing motions. If she surfaces, he'll try to have her declared unfit. Take custody before the baby's born. Cormac was silent. "You want me to dig deeper?" "As deep as it goes." He hung up and stood in the rain, thinking about a woman he'd never met before tonight, a mother he'd failed to save, and the distance between who he was and who he'd promised her he would be. Seren didn't sleep. She lay on the motel bed staring at the ceiling and told herself to close her eyes. The room was warm. The door was locked. The baby was moving gently, small kicks and shifts that had become the rhythm of her days. Everything was as close to safe as it had been in 72 hours. But every time she started to drift, she heard Nash's voice. "Where are you going to go?" At 3 a.m., she gave up. She sat up, turned on the lamp, and pulled out her phone. 14 missed calls, all from Nash. She didn't listen to the voicemails. She couldn't. But she opened her email because some part of her needed to see what story he was telling. The first message was from Nash's lawyer. She read it twice, then a third time. The words swam. Mental instability. Danger to herself and the child. Emergency custody petition. Immediate return advised. He was trying to take her baby. Not just find her. Not just bring her back. He was building a legal case to have her declared unfit before the child was even born. To use every resource at his disposal to make sure she had nothing. Because that was Nash. He didn't just want to win. He wanted to make sure you lost everything. She closed the email, set the phone face down, pressed her hands against her belly and tried to breathe. What do I do? No lawyer. No money for one. No one to tell her how to fight this war against someone with unlimited ammunition. The knock came at 6:47 a.m. Her heart stopped. For one terrible second she was certain it was Nash, that he'd found her, that it was over. It's Vidal, from last night. I'm not going to bother you. I just need to ask you something. She looked through the peephole. He stood a few feet back, hands visible at his sides, deliberately non-threatening. She opened the door 3 inches, chain still on. What? Have you eaten? In the last 24 hours? The question caught her off guard. What? Have you eaten anything? A granola bar yesterday morning. Half a bag of pretzels. Nothing since. I'm fine. You keep saying that. His voice was calm. There's a diner half a mile down the road. Pelham's. Real food. Hot food. I'd like to buy you a meal. Why? Because you're 7 months pregnant and you haven't eaten in a day. That's not... I know what you're going to say. You don't need help, don't need charity, and don't need a stranger making decisions for you. He paused. I'm not making decisions. I'm offering breakfast. You can say no. Another pause. But before you do, when's the last time someone offered you something without wanting something in return? She couldn't remember. 30 minutes, he said. I'll be in the lobby. If you don't come, I'll leave you alone. He walked away. Seren stood at the door. She could close it, go back to bed, pretend this never happened. She thought about the lawyer's email, the $23, the baby who deserved a mother strong enough to accept help. She took off the chain. Pelham's Diner was the kind of place with jukeboxes at the tables and pie under glass domes on the counter. Red vinyl booths, cracked in places, repaired with tape that didn't match. Black and white tile floor scuffed from decades of boots. Coffee in thick ceramic mugs, always hot, always too strong. Everything about it felt like a place that had been there forever. Cormac stood when she walked in, an old-fashioned gesture that surprised her, and waited for her to sit before sitting himself. Order whatever you want. Eat slowly. You've got time. She ordered eggs, toast, juice, and fruit. More than she'd intended. The hunger had been hiding, and now it surfaced. The food arrived. She ate slowly, trying to figure out what this was. You're not going to ask? She said finally. Ask what? Why I'm here. Why I'm alone. Why I'm 7 months pregnant in a motel in the middle of nowhere. You'll tell me when you're ready. What if I'm never ready? Then you won't tell me. He shrugged. I didn't buy you breakfast to get your story. I bought you breakfast because you needed to eat. Seren set down her fork. People don't do that. People don't just help. My mother believed that too. Every kindness came with a price. She lived her whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop. What happened to her? She died. Exhausted, alone, still waiting. The words hung between them. I'm not your mother, Seren said. No, but you've got the same look. The one that says you've been waiting so long for something bad to happen, you've forgotten what good feels like. Her throat tightened. His name is Nash, she said quietly. My husband. I found him with someone else. When I confronted him, he told me I had nowhere to go, that I couldn't survive without him. She looked up. I left anyway, and now he's trying to take my baby. He's telling people I'm unstable, he has lawyers. Her voice cracked. I have nothing. Cormac was quiet. Then, do you want to fight? Or do you want to run? I've been running for 3 days. That's not an answer. She thought about it. Really thought. Yes, I want to fight. Then let me help you. Why? Because I've spent my life learning how to fight men like your husband. His eyes were steady. And I've never lost. What do you get out of this? Maybe I'm paying back a debt. To someone I couldn't help when it mattered. Seren searched his face for the catch. She didn't find it. Okay, she whispered. The house sat at the end of a gravel road that wound through pine trees for nearly a mile before opening onto a small bay. 2 stories, weathered shingles, a porch that wrapped around 3 sides with rocking chairs that had seen better decades. Modest by the standards of wealth, but it had the feeling of a place that had been loved, where someone had once sat watching the water and felt, for a moment, that the world was small enough to hold. Seren stood in the living room and turned in a slow circle. A fireplace with a stone hearth, a couch covered in a faded quilt. Bookshelves lined with paperbacks whose spines had been cracked and re-cracked, a kitchen window looking out onto the bay. "Whose house is this?" she asked. "It belonged to a woman named Marguerite. Her nephew owns it now. Lets me borrow it when I need somewhere quiet." "And you need somewhere quiet often?" "More than you'd think." She walked to the window. The bay was gray under the October sky, but peaceful. "Still, I haven't seen water in months. Nash's house was inland, manicured lawns, hedges, everything perfect, everything controlled." She touched the glass. I forgot what it felt like to look at something that couldn't be controlled. Cormac gave her space. She could feel him staying on the other side of the room, not crowding, not pressing. "There's more," she said. "Things I didn't tell you at the diner." "You don't have to tell me anything." "I know, but I want to." She turned to face him. "If you're going to help me, you need to know what you're helping me fight." She sat on the couch. He sat in a chair across from her. The distance was deliberate and she was grateful. "Nash doesn't just want me back. He wants to destroy me. That's who he is. When he can't control something, he breaks it. I've seen him do it to business partners, to employees, to his own brother, who tried to challenge him for control of the family company." She paused. "He doesn't lose. His entire identity is built on winning. And I defied him. I left. In his mind, that's an attack. The custody petition. That's just the beginning. He's telling people I'm mentally unstable, that I'm a danger to myself and the baby. He has doctors, his doctors, people on his payroll, who will testify I'm unfit. Lawyers who specialize in this. Wealthy husband, troubled wife. They'll paint me as hysterical, hormonal. And the affair? He'll deny it, or minimize it. And people will believe him because he's charming and I'm a woman who ran away in the middle of the night." She shook her head. "On paper, I look exactly the way he wants me to look." "What about the woman? The one you found him with?" "I don't know her name. I didn't ask." "Would she testify?" "Why would she? She has nothing to gain. And Nash would destroy her if she did." The silence stretched. "There's something else," Seren said quietly. "I'm scared. That even if I fight, I'll lose. That he'll take this baby before I hold it. That I'll spend my life watching my child grow up in that house with that man, learning to be exactly like him." She pressed her hands against her belly. "And I'm scared leaving was wrong. That if I'd just stayed, at least I'd be there. At least I could protect." "No." The word was sharp. Cormac had leaned forward. His eyes held hers, and there was something in them she hadn't seen before. Not pity, not anger. Something older. Something forged in fire. "Staying is never protection. My mother stayed for 20 years, told herself she was protecting me. She was wrong." His voice was low but certain. "Enduring isn't strength. Enduring is dying by inches instead of all at once." He held her gaze. "You didn't make the wrong choice. You made the only choice. And you're not going to lose. Because you're not alone anymore. Men like Nash only have power over people who have no one in their corner." Seren's eyes were wet. She didn't wipe them. What if I lose anyway? Then you lose fighting, on your feet, with your dignity intact. He paused. But you're not going to lose. That night on the porch, with the bay silver under moonlight, Seren told him everything. Not just the betrayal. Everything. About the first time Nash criticized her in front of his family, subtle enough to seem like a joke, sharp enough to draw blood. About the way he'd slowly removed her friends, her job, her independence. About the nights she lay awake wondering if she was crazy, because he made her feel crazy, made her question her own memories. He never hit me, she said. That's what I kept telling myself. He never hit me, so it wasn't abuse. But he took everything else. My confidence, my connections, my sense of who I was before him. Cormac listened without interrupting. The worst part is I let him. I participated in my own disappearing. I told myself it was love. That marriage required compromise. She laughed, but there was no humor. I was so busy adapting, I didn't notice I'd stopped existing. You noticed eventually. Only because of her. She pressed her hand against her belly. When I found out I was pregnant, something changed. I started thinking about what I wanted her to learn from watching me. And I realized I was teaching her that this was normal. That love meant shrinking. That a woman's job was to become invisible, so a man could feel large. So you left. I left. With $400 and no plan. She looked at him. Pretty stupid, right? Brave. There's a difference. Doesn't feel brave. Feels like falling off a cliff. Falling can turn into flying. You just need something to catch you. The silence between them was comfortable. Safe. Why are you really doing this? She asked. The house. The help. All of it. Cormac looked at the water for a long moment. The moonlight turned his face into planes of shadow and silver. I told you about my mother. What I didn't tell you is that I promised her, the day she died, that I would never let anyone suffer the way she did. That if I ever had power to help someone escape a man like my father, I would use it. His voice was steady. I've broken every other promise I've made. I've done things that would make you run if you knew them. I've become someone my mother wouldn't recognize. He paused. But this promise, this one I'm going to keep. Not because it will fix what I've done, not because it will bring her back, but because it's the only thing I have left that's still clean. The words hung in the air. Seren understood. This wasn't about her. Not entirely. It was about a boy who'd watched his mother suffer and couldn't save her. A man who'd built an empire and found it empty. A promise made at a deathbed, waiting 17 years to be kept. You're a better man than you think, she said. I'm not. You are to me. The bay held its breath. The moon hung overhead, indifferent to the small human dramas beneath it. Thank you, Seren said, for seeing me, for not looking away. Cormac turned to her. Something in his expression shifted, not softened exactly, but opened. Like a door that had been locked for years finally turning on its hinges. I couldn't look away, he said quietly, even if I wanted to. Cormac made 3 phone calls that night. The first was to Tiernan. I need Declan Morse. Full retainer. Priority client. Whatever he's working on, he drops it. Morse doesn't take custody cases. He does now. Tell him I'm calling in the Galway favor. Pause. That's a big chip to cash. I'm aware. She must be something special. Cormac looked through the window at the living room, where Seren was curled on the couch with a blanket over her shoulders, finally asleep. She's someone who deserves a chance, he said. That's enough. The second call was to Wexler, a private investigator who operated in the space between legal and not quite. Nash Pemberton, real estate developer, Connecticut. I want everything. Financials, business dealings, personal indiscretions. Anyone he's paid off. Anyone he's threatened. Anyone who might talk. How deep? Until you hit bone. Timeline? Yesterday. The third call was to Yara Stennis, former federal prosecutor, now a fixer who understood how power actually worked. Custody case, Connecticut. The husband has money and connections. The wife has nothing but truth. Truth doesn't win cases. Evidence does. Then help me find it. What's the angle? The husband is claiming she's mentally unfit, trying to take the baby before it's born. He's got doctors on payroll, lawyers on retainer, a family that thinks they own the state. And the wife? Is sitting in a safe house an hour from here, 7 months pregnant, with $23 and more courage than anyone I've met in years. Pause. You're different, Cormac. Something's changed. Maybe. This is personal. He didn't answer. All right, I'll make calls, but if this goes sideways, there will be blowback. On you. On everything you've built. I know. And you're willing to risk that? For a stranger? Cormac thought about the question. About his mother dying in a hospital bed. About the promise he'd made. Yes, I am. Over the following weeks, things began to move. Declan Morse arrived on the third day, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of a general and the reputation of someone who never lost cases he decided to win. He sat with Seren for 4 hours, taking notes, asking questions, building architecture. Your husband is sloppy, he said when finished. Arrogant men always are. He's filed motions that contradict each other. Made claims that can be disproven. Assumed no one would challenge him. Morse smiled thinly. He's wrong. Wexler's reports arrived on the 5th day. Financial records showing Nash had been moving money offshore for years, money that should have been marital property. And photographs, time-stamped, dated, irrefutable, of Nash with not one other woman, but 3, over the course of the marriage. He's systematic, Tiernan observed. This is a pattern. Can we use it? Seren asked. Every piece, Morse said. Pattern of deception, financial misconduct, character evidence. That paints a picture, and judges respond to pictures. The medical records came next. Nash's doctor had provided similar mental instability documentation in other custody cases. Always wealthy clients, always vague diagnoses. Wexler found 3 women who'd been on the receiving end. 2 were willing to talk. He's a hired gun, Morse said. Now we can prove it. Seren sat through every meeting with a focus that impressed even Morse. She asked questions, took notes, refused to be passive in her own defense. You're not what I expected, Morse told her one evening. What did you expect? Someone fragile. I'm not fragile, I'm just tired. There's a difference. Fragile people break and stay broken. Tired people rest and get back up. He looked at her. You're going to get back up, Mrs. Pemberton. And when you do, your husband is going to wish he'd never underestimated you. Weeks later, Seren found Cormac on the porch at sunset. I want to thank you, she said. Don't. Thanks implies debt. Then let me say something else. She sat beside him. I was drowning. Weeks ago, I had no air, no way forward, and you reached in and pulled me out. Cormac kept his eyes on the water. My mother drowned in silence, in shame, in believing she had no options. His voice was quiet. I watched her go under for 17 years. I was too young, too powerless to stop it. He turned to her. I'm not powerless anymore, and I won't watch anyone else go under, not if I can reach them. Seren held his gaze. Whatever you've done, whatever you think disqualifies you from being good, it doesn't change what you're doing now. She paused. My mother used to say redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing a different future. She went inside. Cormac sat alone, looking at the water, thinking about different futures. For the first time in 17 years, he wondered if one was possible. Mela was born on a Tuesday in December. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Healthy. Perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a shock of dark hair, and a cry that filled the room like a song. Serene had been at the house by the bay for 11 weeks. Full term, just as the midwife had predicted. The labor was long but uncomplicated. Cormac waited in the living room, pacing with a restlessness he couldn't explain. When the midwife came out to tell him it was a girl, he sat down heavily and put his head in his hands. "They're both safe," he said quietly. "They're both safe." Seren named her Mela, after Riva's sister who had died too young and been loved too much. When she told Cormac, he didn't speak for a long moment. "My mother talked about Mela every day," he finally said. Said she was the bravest person she ever knew. Said if she'd had half of Mela's courage, she would have left my father the first time he raised his hand. "Then it fits," Seren said, looking at the baby in her arms. "I want her to be brave. I want her to know she can leave any room that makes her feel small." 2 days later, Seren woke at 3 a.m. to feed Mela and found Cormac in the living room, staring at dying embers in the fireplace. "You should sleep," she said. "Can't." She sat in the chair across from him, Mila nursing quietly. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. That's what's strange." He looked at her, at both of them. "For the first time in years, nothing's wrong. And I don't know what to do with that." "You could enjoy it." "I don't know how. I only know how to fix things, fight things, control things." He shook his head. "Peace feels like waiting for an ambush." "Then learn." She smiled softly. "I'm learning. Every day. How to exist without waiting for disaster. How to believe that good things might actually last." Mila finished nursing. Seren held her against her shoulder, patting gently. "She's beautiful," Cormac said. "She is. You're going to be a good mother." "I'm going to try." She looked at him. "And you're going to be there to help, if you want to be." The question hung in the air. "I want to be," he said. It was the smallest sentence, and the biggest. Seren stood, walked to where he sat, and placed Mila gently in his arms. He held her like she was made of glass, like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. "Hello, Mila," he whispered. "I'm going to keep you safe, both of you. I promise." The fire crackled. The bay was silent. And somewhere in that house, a promise made 17 years ago began to fulfill itself. The hearing took place 8 weeks after Mela was born, in a courthouse in Hartford. Seren sat at the plaintiff's table with Mela in a carrier beside her, wearing a navy dress Morse had suggested. Professional, composed, nothing that could be called hysterical. Declan Morse sat to her right, a stack of folders in front of him, his expression the calm of a man who had already won and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. Nash sat at the defendant's table with 3 lawyers and a face like stone, but Seren could see the cracks, the way his jaw tightened when Morse presented the financial records, the way his hands gripped the table when the photographs were entered into evidence, the way he kept glancing at his father in the gallery, looking for reassurance that wasn't coming. He'd lost control. And Nash Pemberton didn't know how to exist without control. The testimony took 2 days. The 3 women Wexler had found testified about Nash's pattern, the affairs, the promises, and the way he discarded them when they became inconvenient. 2 of them cried on the stand. One looked directly at Seren and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was married. He told me he was divorced." The doctor who had provided the mental instability documentation was cross-examined for 3 hours. By the end, his credibility was in shreds. Morse produced records showing he'd provided identical testimony in 4 other custody cases, always for wealthy men, always with the same vague diagnoses. The judge's face grew darker with every page. And then there were the financial records, the offshore accounts, the money that should have been marital property, hidden away where Seren would never find it. Mr. Pemberton, the judge said when the testimony concluded, you have wasted this court's time with fraudulent claims, falsified documentation, and what appears to be a systematic attempt to weaponize the legal system against your wife. Nash's lawyer started to object. The judge silenced him with a look. The custody petition is dismissed. The countersuit for divorce is granted on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. Full custody of the minor child is awarded to the mother, with no visitation rights for the father pending a complete psychological evaluation and parenting assessment. She closed her folder. I'm referring this case to the State Bar for review, and I'm recommending that Dr. Harlow be investigated for perjury. She looked at Nash with undisguised contempt. You should be ashamed of yourself, Mr. Pemberton. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. It was over. Nash found her in the hallway afterward. Seren was standing by a window, Mila sleeping peacefully in her arms. The winter sun fell across the marble floor in pale rectangles. Seren. She turned. He looked smaller than she remembered. Still tall, still wearing a suit that cost more than most people's rent, but something had been stripped away. The confidence, the certainty, the absolute conviction that the world would bend to his will. I want to talk. We have nothing to discuss. Please. His voice cracked. 5 minutes. Some part of her needed to see this, needed to hear what he would say now that he'd lost everything. 5 minutes. Nash took a breath. I made mistakes. Mistakes. I know that word isn't big enough. I never thought you'd actually leave. I thought I could have everything. The marriage, the family, the others. I thought I was entitled. He stopped, started again. When you left, I couldn't accept it. So I told myself you were the problem, that you were unstable, that I was the victim. You tried to take my baby. I know. You told people I was crazy, filed false reports, tried to destroy me. I know. And you think I know means something? Silence. It doesn't, he said finally. Nothing I say will undo what I did. I just wanted you to know I see it now. What I was. What I did. Seren studied his face. She'd spent 3 years learning to read that face, navigate his moods, and survive his control. This was new. This was defeat. I hope you mean that, she said. Not because I need you to. I stopped needing anything from you the night I left. But because Mila deserves a father who understands what he did wrong. Maybe someday, if you actually change, there might be a place for you in her life. But that's not up to me. That's up to her. She turned away. Seren. She stopped. The man who helped you, the lawyers, the investigators, all of it. Nash's voice was hoarse. Who is he? She looked back over her shoulder. Someone who kept a promise, she said. Something you never learned to do. She walked away. Nash stood alone in that hallway, watching the woman he'd lost carry the daughter he'd thrown away, and felt, for the first time in his life, the full weight of his choices. It didn't crush him, but it would never let him go. 2 years later, on a Saturday in June, Seren stood on the porch of the house by the bay and watched the sun rise over the water. She was wearing a simple white dress. Nothing fancy. She'd never wanted fancy. Just something clean and beautiful, and hers. Her hair was down, curling slightly in the salt air. Her feet were bare on the weathered wood. Inside the house she could hear Mela laughing, the bright, uncomplicated laughter of a 2-year-old who had never known fear, never known control, never known anything but love. That sound, that laugh, was everything Seren had fought for. Everything she'd risked. Everything she'd won. The door opened. Cormac stepped onto the porch. He wore a dark suit, but he'd taken off the jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He looked uncomfortable in the formal clothes. He always did. But he'd worn them for her. "She's asking for you," he said. Something about needing her special shoes for the ceremony. The sparkly ones. That light up. I tried to explain those might not be traditional wedding attire. She informed me traditional is boring. Seren smiled. "She's not wrong." "No, she's not." They stood together, looking at the water. The bay was calm, silver pink with dawn. "Are you ready?" Cormac asked. "I've been ready for a long time." She turned to face him. "I'm not marrying you because you saved me. I'm marrying you because somewhere along the way, while you were keeping your promise to your mother, I fell in love with the man who made that promise, the man who believes he's not good enough for redemption, but keeps trying anyway. The man who thinks he's broken, but is actually the most whole person I've ever known." She touched his face. "I choose you. Today. Tomorrow. Every day after that." Cormac closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "I choose you too," he said. "Both of you." The ceremony was small. Tiernan served as best man, looking uncomfortable in a tie but refusing to complain. Morse sat in the front row, dignified as ever. Yara Stennis flew in from D.C. and cried through the entire thing. A handful of others who had become family over 2 years filled the remaining chairs. Mayela walked down the aisle in her light-up shoes, scattering flower petals with serious concentration. At the end, she looked up at Cormac. "Now you're going to be my daddy for real." He knelt to her level. "I've been your daddy for real since the day I met you," he said. "This just makes it official." Mila considered this, nodded, satisfied, went to sit in the front row with her shoes flashing. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Hers were about choosing to trust, choosing to stay, choosing to believe that love could be safe. His were about promises. "I promise to protect you," he said, "not by controlling you, but by standing beside you. I promise to be honest, even when it's hard. I promise to let you see the parts of me I've hidden from everyone else. And I promise that no matter what comes, no matter how dark the water or how loud the storm, I will never let you face it alone." The officiant pronounced them married. Cormac kissed his wife. Mayela clapped and cheered. And somewhere, a ghost named Riva smiled. That evening, after the guests had gone and Mayela was asleep with her sparkly shoes still on, Seren and Cormac sat on the porch. The moon was full, the water silver. The air smelled of salt and honeysuckle. "I have something for you," Cormac said. He reached into his pocket and pressed a small brass key into her palm. "What's this?" "The deed to this house was signed over last month. It's ours now. Officially." He paused. "I wanted you to have a place that was really yours, that no one could take. A place where Mayela could grow up knowing what safety feels like." Seren stared at the key, then at the house, then at him. "This is ours?" "This is ours. The house. The bay. All of it." Her eyes filled with tears, the kind that come when something broken finally finishes mending. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They sat in silence, two people who had been drowning, who had found each other, who had learned that survival sometimes means reaching for someone else's hand. Inside, Mila slept peacefully. Her sparkly shoes flickered once, twice, then went still. Outside, the bay held its breath. And on the porch of a house that was finally, truly home, Seren pressed the key against her heart and felt, for the first time in her life, completely safe. Not because the world had changed, but because she had found someone who would face it with her, whatever came next.